Alright guys, so the last of the, I guess, first 5 boss Elestrals just got spoiled or released, I guess. So now that we have one for each element and a few ascension lines and details to go into, I kind of want to take a look at all of the ones that we have and kind of give them a rating from like a competitive-ish standpoint of what they might end up being and kind of talk about their stats and abilities as like how good they might be. Now we don't have all the rule sets yet, but I think we have enough information to kind of figure out what we want to do with each Celestial and how competitive it might be or what kind of deck it might go in. So I'm not really going to spend too much time with the preamble. I'm just going to go right into it because I don't want this video being super long in case I ramble for ages about a specific Celestial. And with no specific order, I'll just start with the newest Majesty and we'll go into that first. Alright, so Majesty, it's a 3 enchantment cost, 6/14 to start, and as long as it's enchanted, all of your spirits are considered water in addition to their standard element, and then this Majesty gains 1 attack for every enchanting water in your field. So I think its starting attack line is a little bit low, and if you rush this out, its attack might only be like 9, 10-ish. It won't be insanely high. But what is nice is that the rest of its line kind of helps you get your spirits into play and keep them there. So like the slug will get you a spirit back from your underworld. So if you have to discard it for whatever reason, you can get it back. And Glubby gets you an extra enchant for a water spirit. So it's a little bit of a ramp. So it kind of gets you from the underworld, lets you play it again. You know, it really helps speed things up a little bit, or at least fill your board up with those water elementals or spirits. Sorry. So I think this card's pretty good in like a fixing situation. If you're playing 2 or 3 colors you need to get those waters for other abilities that you might get. My main issue, it doesn't really protect itself. It might have like a little bit of a combo potential, which allowing you to discard or expend extra spirits that might not be the correct element, especially if you're going for those 3 colors and you really need the water for some reason. But I don't think this card's going to be that good early game. It might be a good finisher if you have a huge board, but if you have a huge board, you're probably doing really well. Now the 14 defense, that's a good number. I mean, compared to the other defense stats, it's up there. I think it's the second highest. So it I don't know. I think it's definitely going to be a little bit on the low end for how it's not a win con, I should say. It's not going to win you the game by itself, but it will definitely help you get to a winning state, I think, by fixing your spirit colors, and it can be a big beater late game. I mean, I'm thinking like if you rush this out, it's 3 enchantment cost, so it might be a 3 or +3/+4 attack when it comes out. So it might be a 10. That's still a little low compared to the other guys. Like the only one that would beat in an attack race would be Imperial, which is an 8. We'll get him to later, but like at the start being a 6, pretty low. If you rush him out, it's gonna still be kind of low. But if it's a mid to late game situation, it'll be huge. It's just not going to protect itself. It's not going to win you the game by itself. It's just kind of there. So I think if I were to give this a rating, it's probably like a B, B minus. I think like it might be your mid-range to control-y kind of deck card, something to fix colors, something to kind of keep you going. Its previous 2 cards, again, Sluggle and Globby definitely help with this game plan of trying to get some extra water and keeping things flowing. No pun intended. So I think it's okay. I think all the boss monsters are good. I just think they can get to places that aren't. They have different, homes and stuff, and I think Majesty might be one of the weakers on its own, but with a deck, it could be really strong. All right, and then we also have Stratamoth. I think Stratamoth is probably the easiest of all the boss Elestrals, or 3 enchantment cost Elestrals that we've seen so far to get out, because we know that Nimbug during main phase you can expend an extra wind energy to special ascend it to from Nimbug to Sirikun, and then developers have said that Sirikun has an ability that generally if it lasts 1 turn, on the board, it'll eventually ascend into Stratamoth. We haven't got the actual card text yet, but if that's the case, Nimbug to Ziraku into Stratamoth is like a 1-2-3, like maybe a turn 2 thing, maybe a turn 3 thing, but it's going to be extremely consistent against Stratamoth. I think Stratamoth is one of the boss Elestrals that you will definitely, if it's in your deck and that's your plan to get it out, you will be running 3 of these, like, or the maximum amount at all times, because if you're trying to get to Stratamoth, you play Nimbug, let's say, go right into Ziraku, and Ziraku gets knocked out by a card, they end up in your underworld, and you start rebuilding to the next Stratamoth, you get another Nimbug out, you get another Ziraku, and you get Stratamoth. All the failures to get to Stratamoth, if you're trying to kind of build up with the special ascensions to get there, only make Stratamoth bigger. Like, no matter what happens on your path to get to Stratamoth, in the end, it's buffing Stratamoth. I think that's really strong. I think in the deck that you're trying to force Stratamoth out as fast as possible for this big beater is just really good. I think that having the effects that kind of redundantly help each other, so that no matter what happens, even if you only get Stratamoth out without losing some Nimbugs, Tirakuns along the way, it's 11 to 13 power. Like, it's pretty decent. Like, that's pretty high on the end for just a base attack. And it has a protection ability, so you can expend some wind and return a rune in your opponent's field or hand. So you could, if they have a troublesome, like, face down card, or you kind of expect them to have a card that's going to destroy something, or there's something problematic, or they have an artifact that's problematic, just get rid of it. Just send it back to their hand, make them have to replay it. So it kind of has a pseudo protection effect. It gets big on its path up to its 3 cost. You're generating more value for it. It's making it stronger. So I think this is honestly very strong, and it's one of the few boss monsters that I've seen so far that I would definitely always, if I'm going for this strategy, just run 3 of. Just get as many as you can out, because you're going to be trying to pump them out as fast as possible with the Ascension line. And worst case scenario, you maybe have to hard play this. I'm assuming you can hard cast that for 3. It's always going to be beneficial to just get as many as you can. So you'd run the 3 Nimmug, you run the 3 Sirikun, you run 3 Shadowmoth, pop them out, call it a day. So I think Stratamoth is probably like an A minus A tier. Like, I think it's pretty strong, and I think it's a great way to kind of protect from non-creature cards, which it's a big creature. I don't think it really cares too much about creatures unless those creatures have, removal effects. But on its own, I think it's going to be just a big beater that's fairly easy to get out comparatively to some of the other guys. So that's my thought on Stratamoth. There we go. And then the next one we got is Trifernal. So Trifernal is, for its base power or attack, is the highest out of all the monsters we've seen. It's got really low defense, and that's similar to its Necruff. Necruff is a 5/1, which is high attack, low defense. I think for the 1 enchantments that we've seen so far, 5 is the highest. It's very aggressive kind of play style for Necruff, so I'm assuming Trifernal kind of fits that. So every time your opponent enchants an Elestral, you can expend a fire to decrease its defense by 3, and if its defense falls to 0, it's destroyed. So basically, if you get this out first from your opponent, and your opponent's still building their board, and they play like Necruff, or just like something just small because they're trying to build up, it just says no. If you're playing a mirror match and your opponent's trying to get a Trifernal out and you get yours out first, they go to play Trifernal, you just go, your Trifernal's gone. That's really good, but I don't know if Trifernal is going to be super strong, because I think it's a win more card, and I think this might be the weakest of the 5/3 cost Elestrals we've seen so far, because it doesn't really protect itself, and it's a little bit of just win more. So you get it out and you just start pinging stuff down as they come into play. But if your opponent already has a board and they're not enchanting anything more, and you play this, it's just a 14/3 that your opponent can probably interact with and get rid of before they go into their combat. So I don't know how strong Trifernal is going to be, unless Blazarus, which we haven't seen yet, it's its second stage, unless that has some really strong effect to get Trifernal out. I don't know if Trifernal is going to be super strong on its own. It's going to need a lot of support. And as just a hard cast card, just something to just plop down and go pass, it's not going to do much. It's again, I think it's just a win more card. It's a card that where if you're ahead, you have it in play, your opponent has to catch up. They're going to have a harder time to catch up, which makes it good. But if they're already ahead and you play Trifernal, you've just almost played a vanilla. So it's just a 14-3 if you're behind, which is, I don't think, going to do it for you. I think it's just going to get removed or popped or destroyed by, say, like a Stratamoth and move on. So I think Trifernal is honestly like a C, maybe C plus with the right support. I could be wrong. We don't know all the rules. We don't know all the cards yet, but I think he's a little bit on the weekend for what we know right now. And obviously, these are all kind of pre-production stuff. These aren't official cards. There's going to be little text tweaks here and there. There's going to be a couple balancing changes, but as is, I think it's a little on the weekend. All right, so next up is going to be the Centaur and Centaur line. So I think Centaur, out of the 5 that we've seen so far for 3 costs, is probably individually the strongest. It's got decent stats, got a big defense. You can remove some earth spirits from it to destroy a card on the field. That's really good. Like, I'll get into that in a second. And then fully enforced enchanted, Centaur cannot be targeted by invoke runes. So on its base, let's say you don't have Foley Forest in, you get Centaur out. Let's say you have 2 or 3 Earth Spirits in it because of how you got it out. Let's say you have 2 because you special ascended it, yada yada yada. You play them down. You ping down whatever is going to be the most threatening card to Centaur that could potentially, knock it out within a turn. And then he's safe, theoretically. And then maybe you have multiple Earth Spirits. You ping down the 2 biggest threats. He's got solid defense, so he can survive a combat. If you have Foley Forest enchanted, can't be targeted by Invoke Rune. So if your opponent has, destroy target opponent's Celestial, he's not getting hit by that unless it's a counter rune. But I don't think counter runes are going to involve cards really in play because they're counters. So he's got great protection. He destroys the biggest threat in your board. So he almost will always be a 2-for-1. I think this is just the strongest spirit we've seen so far. The caveat being, I think he's also one of the hardest to get out through the special ascension lines, going from Sprouter to September to Centaur, because so you play Sprouter, you get an artifact into your hand. Great. You still need to get September out. You still need to get the artifact out. You have September attack the artifact, and you have to destroy an Elestral with it to get Centaur to special summon. That's really, really clunky from a game perspective. So you need Sprouter is 1 card. September is the 2nd card you have to draw into. You have to play the artifact that you draw. So now we're at 3 cards. Then you have to destroy an opponent. So that's 4 steps. Then you kind of want to get Foley Forest out right away before you get Centaur out so that you can protect the Centaur. So you're looking at 4 cards, 5 steps. Your opponent might not even have something you can destroy with September, so you might not be able to get the special ascension from Centaur. And then you get Centaur out, and Centaur just cleans house. So it's a very complicated chain. Or not really complicated, but it's a long chain of events to get to the point where Centaur will hit the board and just go to town. So I think he's the strongest but hardest to get out, but because of he's always kind of 2-for-1ing with his disenchant ability, and he can have really strong protection if you kind of set up for it without needing a bunch of back row cards. You have your stadium out, I think he's probably the strongest. I think he's like an A plus tier, like in any kind of like control deck, any kind of like tempo deck that kind of focuses on getting Centaur out or protecting, the combo to get up to him. I think he's really strong, and he's just gonna hit the board no matter what happens. If he hits the board, he does something extremely productive for your defenses. Like it just hit him down. Even if you can just drop him and destroy your opponent's biggest threat, you destroy their biggest threat and ask your opponent to answer it now. So if you drop them down, destroy your opponent's biggest threat, and they can only, let's say you don't have fully forced, and they have to spend a removal card to get rid of them, you 2 for 1. If they have to send in one of their spirits into them, you might deal 2 for 1. If they leave it on the board and you get more energy under them, or spirits under them, to disenchant, you just go finger gun, just blast and just pop, pop, pop. There goes your board. There goes all the threats that I'm worried about. Past turn, your opponent has to now, with less resources, respond to it. I think it's really strong. All right, and last but not least is going to be Imperial and its kind of support line that we've seen so far. So Imperial has lowest attack, solid defense, I guess middle of the road defense from what we've seen, and it has the ability that you can expend 2 lightning to target, destroy 1 card in your opponent's field, and then it gets 1 attack for every lightning in your spirit deck. So the earliest you get this out, the strongest it's going to be. So that 8 becomes, if you're playing just solo lightning, which I think mixing elements will probably be a better strategy, this could be, like a fifth plus 15. Like if you magically get this out super fast and you only have 3 lightning in play, so you have like 17 still in your spirit deck, it's a 25 attack. That's huge. It has a little bit of protection. You can expend some of lightning to destroy cards in your opponent's field, and it's just a solid beater. It doesn't really have in its ascension line a way to get it out faster, easier. So if it gets support cards to get it out, so it's kind of got that Centaur issue where it's really, really strong, but you don't have a way to just get it out. It's not just going to magically be like, up special, enchant Imperial, turn 3, hit ya, bing, bing, bang. Like it's going to be a little slow, kind of like Centaur, has a little less protection than Centaur, but has a little bit more support. So the Quackle's going to get you some uh, energy back or spirits back if you need it. So, you can expend those early on knowing that you're going to get them back. And if you get it back, it's going to mean your Imperial is going to be bigger in the end. Your Signatric gets an attack for every enchanting lightning on the field. So your Signature is going to be pretty solidly big. Again, if it's like a solo lightning deck, it's going to be pretty massive when you get it out. If it's not a solo lightning deck, it's going to be solidly big. If we see some fixing like we do with Majesty, if we see something that says all of your spirits are lightning in addition, that's huge. Like your signature is going to be huge. It'll hold its own. It's not going to do great, I don't think. So getting the Imperial might be a little rough, but it has protection. It has good stats. It has a big attack line. So I think it's probably kind of in the same vein of Stratamoth, where it's like it's big, it has a little bit of protection. It's not going to come out as fast as Stratamoth, but I think it has a stronger protection effect than Stratamoth, where you're destroying something as opposed to returning something, and it's any card in your opponent's field. So I think Imperial's probably going to be in that like B plus A tier, a little bit less than Centaur, around the same level as Moth, and it's just going to be, I think, a strong beater. Good monster to get out early. It doesn't really, actually, the earlier you get it out, the stronger it's going to be. So I think it's a great one to get out early. It's going to get a little bit weaker as you get into the later game, literally weaker because the attack will be lower, but at least there's ways to get, those lightning spirits back from your underworld with other cards in its archetype. So we'll see how that goes. So yeah, that's Imperial. So I just want to end this with a little bit of just kind of overview. So yeah, I think if you're going for just like cards that win you the game rankings, Centaur will win you the game. Majesty will not win you the game, but it'll help you win the game. Trifernal is you're already ahead, it'll get you a win more condition. Imperial is just a solid beater with a little bit of removal ability so it can protect itself if you get rid of your opponent's threat. And Stratamoth I think is just like the super consistent, just you work towards it. If you fail to get to it, It's going to be bigger in the end when you get to it finally. It's going to be a big beater. It's good. So everything here is strong. It's just where they fit and what kind of support they get to how good they're going to be in the end. So we'll kind of see how the rest of the cards. I mean, we only have, maybe 20 things revealed to us so far, roughly, compared to, so that's a fifth of the set almost. Like, there's still going to be, 80 some odd cards, if not more, that we're going to see. So we'll see what kind of support they get, what other boss Celestials we might get, what other maybe, two enchant costs we get to support. So we have like Sonicor that we've seen, which prevents countering. So that kind of gives you a layered effect. Like imagine if you're playing like a Lightning Earth deck and you get Sonicor out, and then right after you get Sonicor out, you have Folly Force, and you play Centaur. Now your Centaur can't be countered, can't be killed by Invoke, destroys the biggest thing on your opponent's board. So I think you're going to see a little bit of like that, maybe a lightning earth control with Centaur or Sonicore kind of style. You might see a little bit more of aggro on the Trifernal page. You want to get ahead of your opponent with your aggro Elestrals, get the Trifernal out, stay ahead. Stratamoth, I think, would be a little bit more of a tempo style where you're trying to just build towards it. If you fail to build towards it, you can just kind of keep chugging through and build towards it again. And Majesty, I think, is going to be that like is going to be almost not necessarily required, but like a huge boon in those water focused 2 to 3 color decks where you want to get the water fixing and you want, a solid beater. It's not going to be able to protect itself, so hopefully the water card's a little bit more on the defensive side to help keep it alive. But I think that's kind of where I stand with all these. Um, Feel free to, argue and tell me I'm wrong in the comments. I'm not trying to pick favorites here. My favorite so far are probably Centaur Majesty, but I just think like from a competitive standpoint, what these cards do compared to how all the other card games I've played in the past, kind of like what those effects lead into. So we don't know how Elestrals is really going to be. I could be completely off the mark. For all we know, Centaur is an F tier, and Majesty is like, double S tier. We don't really know, but we'll find that out as we get more cards. We're going to get some playtest cards soon. I think it'll be interesting to see how correct I am. Um, But yeah, I think from our boss monsters, we want protection and power, and not every card here has that protection. And in some cases, they might not even have that power effect. Like Trifernal could, in a worst case scenario, just be a 14-3 that just gets popped. So we'll see how everything goes. Thanks for listening, guys. Again, feel free to just yell at me in the comments. I don't know how often I'll read comments. I don't really do YouTube, but I do want to kind of get ahead of the Celestial project and just kind of get some conversations rolling. And have a great day.